Well, I can imagine myself when you say Geschäftslosigkeit, because I'm also one of those who are unemployed today. Well, when you say Geschäftslosigkeit, what comes to my mind first is flexicurity, which was a term being made popular by Mario Monti, as you know, who said that all the young people should get accustomed to the idea that they will have no stable job anymore. But this is a good thing, said Monti, because what you will have is flexibility and security at the same time. But what we can see today is the flexibility of the people who give you employment to fire you, basically, and no security. So when we speak about employment and unemployment, unfortunately, I think that the majority of my generation in the 20s, in the 30s, I'm in the 30s, don't have a job anymore, and well, they live the dream of flexicurity. Well, it's a good question, especially if you pose this question at the current G20 summit in Hamburg, because what you can see here is that many different groups, many different activists belonging from the Autonomische Linke, radical left, to the Greens, to the Social Democrats and so on, are protesting against the G20. And I'm not even sure if they know what they are actually protesting against, because the G20 as we know it today is not the same G20 as we had it in '99, for instance, when it was formed, or in 2008, when the second biggest installment of the G20 happened. And what you can see is precisely what you asked in your question, which is what is missing is a big idea, a big narrative. What we know today is what we are fighting against, and I'm not even sure whether we know what we are fighting against, because it's not the same to fight against Putin, Erdogan, Trump on the one hand, or Macron, Theresa May and Merkel on the other hand, although all of them together come under the umbrella of the G20. So if you say I'm fighting against the G20, what does it exactly mean? So this is not even clear today, and if this is not clear, how can it be clear what is the main idea of what we are fighting for? So I think definitely the utopia or the main idea is missing today from the protest movements. Well, I'm not sure if this is correct, because many people are resisting on the daily level and in the daily life. But when the G20 happens, then these people become visible, and they come from all corners of the world. So we can expect, I don't know, 100 or 200,000 people on the streets. But all these people who come to the G20, they are active in the daily life, because most of these people are activists and so on. So I would say that all over Europe, but also in the global south, you have people who are resisting and fighting on the daily level. But the uniqueness of the G20 is that on the one hand the power is materialized. You can see it with the orchestra of power, with all the policemen, predator drones and militarization of Hamburg. And precisely because of the materialization of power, you have something what Hegel would call concrete universality, that the system becomes concrete but it's still universal, and that all the people who oppose this system also become visible. So I would answer to your question in the sense that people are resisting on the daily level, many groups, but during such big events the resistance becomes more visible than it is usually. I would put it like this. I think that in daily life and also in politics, we are forced to do compromises. Which means, I mean, I can have a coffee or dinner with a capitalist if you want me to speak in that language, and I really had. But it's one thing to do a compromise, and it's another thing to be compromised. So for instance, if you get into power in a country, not Germany, that's a bit difficult, but let's say Greece, as we had with the Syriza experience in Greece. It's one thing to do one compromise and the other compromise, but it's another thing to sign the third memorandum and to become compromised. So I would say for any left or radical left option which would come to power, yes, of course, when you come to power you have to speak to the capitalists, of course. Or you hang them immediately and you have a Khmer Rouge system or something like that, I don't know. But I think you have to talk to them, and some people lead the industry, like you have to talk to these people as well, I guess, although they're not interested. But it's another thing to be compromised. I think we have to get accustomed to the idea that there will be no final victory. Maybe under our lives it will be impossible to change capitalism and to overthrow capitalism, which doesn't mean that we cannot have one small victory and another small victory. But important to say is also that there will be no final defeat. So if we are defeated today, it doesn't mean that we will be defeated tomorrow. So I think that, what we learned from past struggles, not decades of struggles, but centuries of struggles, is the struggles go on. If you don't see the Occupy Wall Street movement today, it doesn't mean that the Occupy Wall Street movement disappeared. If you don't see the people on Tahrir Square anymore, although you can see capitalism back to Egypt, it doesn't mean that these people disappeared physically or mentally. They're still active. So in that sense, I think it's a continual process. I don't think that during my lifetime we will get rid of capitalism. Excuse me? You think so? Well, then you will live much longer than me, I think, Thomas. What comes after capitalism? Well, the easiest would be to say post-capitalism, but I think that's also a bit naive, the book by Paul Mason and so on. No, to be serious, what I think is that, unfortunately, when Frederick Jameson said that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism, I think, unfortunately, that holds true. That even the leftists cannot imagine the end of capitalism anymore. If, for instance, if we speak about post-capitalism and the idea that, we will have universal basic income, the machines and the robots will work instead of us and so on, well, I have to play the advocatus diaboli here and say that it won't be like that, because Silicon Valley is already privatizing what Marx would call the general intellect. It means that they will even use the universal basic income to integrate it into the capitalist system. And I think, if you look at 68, also all the big requests of the 68 in the end became co-opted by capitalism. So unfortunately, I'm not sure that during my lifetime we will succeed to get rid of capitalism. What I believe in and what I'm doing is what I would call subversion, in the sense that I think that we can subvert the existing system by using the tools of the very system, like this camera, for instance, which is a tool of capitalism as well. And on the other hand, that we can create some sort of autonomous spaces inside of the capitalist machine, which are not necessarily outside of capital, but they are a kind of, for instance, alternative economies, cryptocurrencies, experiments which are happening on the municipal level all over Europe today, which is, a kind of economic system which is outside of the capitalist system of exploitation. I think in the long term that's something we have to work on, and maybe by working on that we can get rid of capitalism. But if you think that by starting a new big revolution we will get rid of capitalism, I'm very skeptical.